All right, guys. Hey, coming to you live from the garage again, and going to be going over the short FRQ problems that I assigned as part of the module. I believe it was module 10 homework assignment. We were to go over 10 short FRQs. So the reason I chose this to be our last assignment before we go into AP mode is because our AP test, as you guys definitely know, is broken down into two parts. The first part is going to have two FRQs on it. It's going to be supposed to be modeled after this type of FRQ. So we've done a bunch of these in class, but I thought, why not? Let's just throw these bad boys out there and tackle them. The second part of the AP exam is going to be another FRQ, and it's going to be the long FRQ. That's the one that we've been doing the most of. That's like A through G, usually about fiscal policy, monetary policy, loanable funds market, maybe a Phillips curve in there. The short ones are really quick and to the point, so I thought 10 wouldn't be too bad. Well, let's get at it. So we're going to start off with 2019, number 2. Where's my head going to fit the best? I think my head's going to fit right over here. Hello, friend. So they are saying that we have an expected inflation rate in a country at 3%, a current unemployment of 6%, and a natural rate of unemployment at 4%. So once again, we've got a data salad of stuff. What the heck are we going to do with it? Let's figure it out. So it's number 2, part A. Draw a correctly labeled graph of short run and long run Phillips curve. Cool. Label the current short run equilibrium as X and plot the numerical values. Got it. All right. So we have inflation and we have unemployment. This is our short run Phillips curve and our long run Phillips curve. They said that our current employment rate is 6% and our NRU is 4. So that's the low end of our natural rate of unemployment. Usually it's between 4 and 6%. So this country, their NRU is right there. Our current unemployment rate is 6, so it needs to be to the right. And they want us to label that as point X. They had an expected inflation rate of 3%. This is what they thought it was going to be given our NRU. But clearly we have more unemployment. Cool. B. So draw, oh nope, is the actual inflation rate greater, less than, or equal to the expected inflation rate of 3%? Well, we're expecting us to be in equilibrium right here at our NRU, but we're actually existing over here. So our current equilibrium is going to be less than 3%. Nice. C, assume loans were made taking into account the expected inflation rate of 3%. Will lenders be better off or worse off after they realize the actual inflation rate in Part B? So if loans were assuming a 3% inflation rate, then the interest rate that the loans were going to be made are going to be greater, right? They're going to be up here. But in the end, they could have been down here. So lenders are going to be better off. Why? It's always borrowers that are hurt by unanticipated inflation. This is going to be deflation, right? And so in this case, lenders are going to be better off because it's deflation. All right. So based on the relationship between the actual and the expected inflation rate, what will happen to the natural rate of unemployment in the long run? What's going to happen to the NRU in the long run? Nothing. Nada. Let's reread that just in case. Based on the relationship between the actual and expected inflation rate, what will happen to the natural rate of unemployment in the long run? Natural rate of unemployment is always going to be between 4 to 6% because we can always account that some people are going to be leaving one job and going to another because that's frictional unemployment. Some people, like VCR repairman, they're going to be going through structural unemployment because they're going back to get other jobs. Cyclical occurs in the short run, but in the long run, it returns always back to the long run Phillips curve. So unless we're having a change in our government structure, like maybe we became communist or whatever, it's always going to be 4 to 6% natural rate of unemployment. NRU doesn't change. Cool. So that was a trick question. All right, let's do 2019. It's another 2019. Yep. So 2019, question 3. This came from the Set 2 group. So I plotted this one out. So if you missed your AP exam, then this was the backup exam last year that they took. And it's a comparative advantage one, which is like what we did on the maybe 4th day of school, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, I should drop this class. But let's do it anyway. So I'm going to set up my table real quick because it'll be easier for me to do it that way. So I'm going to have Sweden and Norway, which is amazing because right now my daughter just discovered Frozen. We got Disney Plus because I'm going a little bit crazy, as you can probably imagine. So we discovered Disney Plus. What's up? Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Sorry I left that there. And then we've got 30 and 20. Have a good night. So now I got my table set up. So let's see. It says Sweden and Norway use equal quantities of resources to produce food and capital goods. The table below shows the maximum possible production of food or capital goods in each country. And food, of course, is a consumer good. So capital goods and consumer goods. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the PPC curve for Sweden. Place on the horizontal axis and place food on the horizontal axis and capital goods on the vertical axis. Okay. Plot the relevant numerical values on the graph. Oh, all right. So we're graphing here. My table might be irrelevant. Probably should have previewed this question before I started rambling about Frozen. All right. So which country? So we've got capital on horizontal. And nope, food. Food and capital. Okay, draw correctly labeled for Sweden. So let's throw a title on there for Sweden. When Sweden produces capital goods, it's 100 and food is 50. So our PPC curve looks like that. All right, nice, nice. On your graph in part A, indicate the following. A point that represents efficient level of production, E, a point that represents inefficient level of production, I, and a point that represents unattainable. Oh, this is cool. So if we are being efficient, if we are at our long run equilibrium and our QE equals QY, we're on our PPC, we got ourselves an E. If we're experiencing inefficient use of our resources, that means we're usually having some type of unemployment or something like that. We are inside the PPC curve. We are I. And a point that is unattainable with current level of resources is U. Sweet. Okay. Assume Sweden moves from producing 20 units of food and 60 units of capital goods to producing 30 units of food and 40 units of capital goods. What will happen to economic growth in Sweden in the future? Okay. So originally they're making 60 units of capital goods. A capital good is a good that makes more goods. So this is a tool, it's a resource, it's something that would move your aggregate supply to the right. But if they are now producing more food, which is something that you eat and it's gone, and less capital goods, you're not going to see the same level of economic growth. On one of these graphs, whenever you're producing more capital goods than consumer goods, you're going to have a larger economic growth in the future. If you're producing more food, you're going to have less economic growth in the future. So what will happen to the economic growth in Sweden in the future? This is C. I'll put a B on there too. And then C would be less economic growth. Cool. Which country has a comparative advantage in capital goods and explain? Okay, thank goodness I made that chart for a reason. So this is going to be an output problem because they're talking about how much each country can produce. Are they giving us a time period here? No, but it's a production possibility table. Production meaning make, what comes out. And so let's break it down with an output question. Output, our other goes over. So it's our OOO, not our input question where it was IOU. Input question, the other goes under. We're going to use OOO. So capital goes over food. Food goes over capital. So here, every time Sweden produces 1 unit of food, they give up 2 units of capital goods. Whenever Sweden produces 1 capital good, they give up 1/2 of a unit of food. And they're always going to be reciprocals if we remember that. All right, so same thing again. When I want to figure out the opportunity cost of 1 unit of food, I'm going to put the opportunity cost over. So here, we've got 4 and 30, 1/4, reciprocal, so we know we're right. Now we have to locate which one has a lower opportunity cost. Sweden, they produce 1 unit of food. They give up 2 units of capital goods. Norway, 1 unit of food. They give up 4 capital goods. This one has a lower opportunity cost in food. Norway should have the comparative advantage in capital goods. 1 capital good, we give up half a unit of food, or 1 capital good, we give up a 4th unit of food. So there we go. Our comparative advantages work. They're opposites of each other. I'm good to go. So now let's figure out what the question asked me. Which country has a comparative advantage in capital goods? Capital goods is Norway. So with that one, with D, I'm going to say Norway has the comparative advantage. And then they said why, so I actually have to explain this time. Because they have a lower opportunity cost of producing, it's supposed to be a P, of producing capital goods in terms of food. If you really want to get fancy, you can explain it out and say, well, when Norway produces 1 capital good, they give up a 4th, and Sweden, when they give up 1 capital good, they produce a half. 1/4 is less than 1/2, but that just seems redundant. I would just say Norway has a lower opportunity cost of producing capital goods than Sweden, and that would be an acceptable answer. Okay, and then the section that a lot of us struggle with a little bit, looks like we have a term of trade. Based on the table above, identify a specified number of units of capital goods that can be traded for 10 units of food to be mutually beneficial. Okay, so when you have, when you're the producer of something, you're the producer when you have the comparative advantage. And so we're looking at food. So let's see, based on that, so who is our food producer? Our food producer here is Sweden. So they're the producer, they're the consumer. So any number between these two is going to satisfy both of them. Why? Because when Sweden produces food and they sell it to someone else, they want to get more for the food than they have to give up on their own. Norway, when they buy food from somebody, they want to get it for a lower price than what they would pay for it in opportunity costs. So when Norway makes 1 unit of food, they give up 4 capital goods. So he wants a number smaller than 4. He wants a number greater than 2. So with this one, this is analyzing just 1 unit. You can come out. Hi, is you saying goodnight? Okay. So we're looking at 1 unit of food here, but they're talking about 10 units of food. So why not just multiply this by 10, multiply that by 10, and multiply that by 10? So any number now between 20, where's my pen? So what it looks like my screen froze a little bit. Normally, this number right here represents 1 unit of food, and that was the opportunity cost of 2 and 4. And so why don't we just, since we need to work with 10, let's just multiply this by 10. So if we multiply this by 10 units of food, this becomes an opportunity cost of 20 capital goods. This becomes an opportunity cost of 40 capital goods. So any number now between 20 and 40, they're both going to be happy, and the world is a safer place for children. All right, let's move on to the next question. That one, I think I got a little wordy, had a couple intrusions into my garage sanctuary paradise. All right, so assume the country of Eucland is currently at full employment. The government of Eucland reduces tax rate on household interest earnings. We never even talked about house rate interest earnings, but we can use some common sense and realize, like, okay, if there's a tax reduction on household earnings, we're going to have more money. And if a reduce of taxes gives us more disposable income, so we're happy. So let's see. Assume the economy is at full employment. All right. Do I need to draw anything out here? Not yet. What's going to happen to private savings? Ooh, okay. So if the government reduces the tax rate on interest earnings, we're going to have more money. We're going to assume we're going to spend more money, and we're also going to save more money. So what's going to happen to private savings? Well, we're going to increase it. So this is, let's write this up here, scoot this down a little bit. My squiggly still in there? This is 2018, number 2, and number A, savings is going to increase. We have more disposable income, we're going to save more money, and we're going to spend more money, because you can only do two things with money: save it and spend it. They're not asking us about what's going to happen to spending, they're saying savings. So savings is going to increase. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market and show the effect of the change in private savings identified on the equilibrium rate. Okay, so if I'm going to draw a loanable funds market, I have my real interest rate and my quantity of loanable funds. This is my supply, and this is my demand of loanable funds. I would have had a quantity at equilibrium, and I would have had an interest rate at equilibrium. Looks like my pin froze, there it is, and an interest rate at equilibrium. So if we refer back to the lecture on loanable funds market, you're going to see shifters of demands for loanable funds and supply for loanable funds. Whenever people put money in the bank, this is going back to that T-chart kind of stuff, they're putting that into their checkable deposits, right? Or their demand deposits, or their savings accounts, whatever we want to call it. That's going to increase the excess reserves in that bank, and it's increasing the supply of loanable funds, right? So in this case, if there's an increase in savings, there's going to be an increase in the supply of loanable funds. Okay. So double check the shifters of loanable funds market. They've been using this one a lot lately. Given the real interest rate identified in Part B, okay, answer the following question. What is the short run effect of aggregate demand? Well, if interest rates fall, this is C, I. If interest rates fall, am I taking out money? Yeah, I am. If interest rates fall, consumer spending is going to go up, and investment spending is going to go up, right? So aggregate demand is going to increase and shift to the right. So the explanation, a decrease in interest rate will entice consumers and business to take out loans for large ticket items for consumers and for capital goods for business, increasing aggregate demand in the short run. What is the long run effect on potential GDP in the GDP in Eucland? Explain. What's the long run effect? Well, we know what the long run effect is, no problem. So in the short run, let's draw this bad boy out, AS, AD. Let's say we were in our long run event, we're in our long run equilibrium to start with. Well, the interest rates went down, so this happened, right? Consumers increased their spending, business increased their spending because they took out loans. Aggregate demand in the short run went to the right. When aggregate demand went to the right, that drew up the price level. They said long run, right? So long run effect, when price level goes up, well, people are going to run into their boss. Yo, Copo, give me a raise. And when resource prices go up, aggregate supply shifts to the left, and we return right back to our long run equilibrium. So remember, anytime you go long run, you go home. So the explanation, you can work into that COCO explanation for me. Always ask for a raise when there's inflation. And that takes us to number 3. So question 3. Countries face trade-offs between producing consumer goods and capital goods. Country X takes 1 hour to produce, oh boy, okay. So country X and 2 hours to produce a capital, and 2 hours, oh man. See, there's where dyslexia just hits you, doesn't it? All right, so let's just move it off to the side a little bit. So we've got country X, and it was consumer. I just skipped right over that one. And capital. Country X and country Y. So country X takes 1 hour to produce a unit of consumer, boom, and 2 hours to produce capital. All right, and then country Y takes 2 hours to produce a consumer and 4 hours to produce a capital. Which country has comparative advantage in production of consumer goods, and explain. So right off the bat, they said produce a unit in 1 or 2 hours, right? The constant is the unit, and the variable is what goes in. So it's the labor input. So this is an input question. With an input question, we put our acronym IOU right up center stage so we don't mess it up. Input, the other goes under. We already know what's going to happen. 1 and 2, 2 and 4. This is going to equal itself out. So let's do it anyway, just to prove it. So I'm going to put the other under. So this is 1/2 under. So 1/2 and 2. Other goes under. 1/2. Oops. And 2. So with this one, which country has a comparative advantage in production of consumer goods? There is no comparative advantage because they both have the same opportunity cost in both situations. All right, it's about to get real because the girls in the neighborhood are about to put on a concert for the moms for Mother's Day. If that turns out to be the case, I'll just shut the door. All right, let's get to B. B is giving us a table. Wow, how did we just go from a PPC to a table? Don't know. Calculate the unemployment rate in country X. Show your work. All right, we've got 3 groups of people here that are unemployed, and we've got these people up here that are employed, and these people that aren't in the labor force. So I'm not even going to address them. So what is our labor force made up of? Employed people, unemployed, unemployed, unemployed. So we had frictional was 10,000. Structural was 5,000, and cyclical was 5,000. Add those puppies up, that's 20,000. And let's see, the total employed were 80,000. So my labor force is 200,000 people. So with B, I need to take my unemployed and divide it by my labor force. So these are my unemployed right here. So if I take 20,000 and I divide that by 200,000, I get my unemployment rate of 10% in my economy. Cool. Calculate the labor force participation rate. Okay, my labor force is 200,000. My total population is 300,000. My labor force is my employed plus all my unemployed that we solved for right here. So 200,000 is my labor force with an F, and my total population is 300,000. If we add all of that stuff up, it's going to be 300,000. So 2/3 or 66.6% should be our answer for C. And then D, draw a correctly labeled graph of the PPC curve for country X with consumer goods on the horizontal and capital goods on the vertical. Indicate a point on the graph that reflects the current level of unemployment. All right, we're going for
Tiny little PPC up the slide right here, Sam.
I've got capital. I've got consumer. There's my PPC curve. I just straight lined it. I'm lazy. 10%. Yikes, that is huge. What is our natural rate of unemployment? 4 to 6%. So they're testing to see if you recognize that one. 4 to 6% would be on the curve. So this little homie is chilling down here. Label Z for ain't got the job. All right, let's keep this party train going. Now we're at 2017, number 2. Focus on that, friend. Focus it. Fine. All right, it's going to come in 1 second. Let me just read while it's trying. Maybe my fingernails will focus it. All right, assume that an economy is in long-run equilibrium and the consumers wish to hold less money because they use credit cards more frequently to purchase goods and services. Oh, all right, it's a nice change up. Come on. You're joking with me, right? Let's flip this page back. Focus it. And stay with it. Yes! All right. Me and this machine are going to become one and the same by the end of this thing. All right. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the money market and show the effect of reduced holdings of money on the equilibrium on nominal interest rates in the short run. All right. So A. What do we have here? Since we're doing is this the money market? Yep. So money market, we have our nominal interest rate, and this is the quantity of money down here. This is our money demand and our money supply. So they said that people don't want to hold money because they're using credit cards. All right, sweet. So that's a shifter of money demand curve. Make sure you're comfortable with your money demand curve shifters. So that one drops down. It's going to drop our interest rates. So draw a correctly labeled graph and show the effect. So if I have interest rate E, now I have interest rate 1. That's indicating my decrease in demand for money and the decrease in the interest rate. Based on the change in the interest rate in Part A, what will happen to each of the following in the short run? Prices of previously issued bonds. Oh, snap. Okay, so what do we remember? That there's an inverse relationship between previously issued bond prices and interest rates. Why? Because if interest rates go down, all these new bonds, like if this was 5%, once that thing catches up, if that's 5% and maybe this is 3%, all the new bonds that are going to be printed will be valued at 3%. You'll get 3% return per year. No one's going to want that one. They're going to want the old bonds. So the bond prices, the previously issued bond prices, are going to go up. People want the 5% bonds, not the new ones. So you can sell it in the bond market. So BI is going to increase. What's going to happen to price level and real income? Explain. Oh, cool. All right. Just like our last one, interest rates go down. What's going to happen? Consumers are going to take out loans and spend it, and businesses are going to take out a loan and spend it. AS, AD, this is price level. That's what they're asking us about right here. And real income, GDP. So what's going to happen? Aggregate demand is going to go to the right because they're going to borrow and spend. Price level goes up, and output is going to go up. Boom. Explain, same as we did in the last problem. With a constant money supply, okay, so it's decreased money supply, what will in part, with a constant money supply, based on your answer in part B, will the velocity of money increase, decrease, or remain the same? Oh, okay. So we have a set amount of money in our economy, and now because consumers and businesses are spending money, increase aggregate demand, but there's only a certain amount of it that's floating around. So what's going to happen to the velocity of money? Well, it's going to have to increase, right? So velocity of money, what letter is this? Let's see. So velocity has to increase to handle this increased price level, right? Things are going to cost more now. We have a set amount of money. So I'm going to have to spend that dollar more times throughout the year to handle this increase in price level. And that goes back to the equation that was, let's see, money supply, money time. I'm trying to think, what was the acronym we came up with in period 5? It was MVPY. So money supply times velocity equals price level times output. And so in this case, our price level is going up. This one is constant, and this one is constant. So what's going to happen to the velocity of money? This one has to increase. And shout out to period 5 for coming up with that one. Your coach gives an award at the end of the year. MVP. Why? I love it because I was always struggling for how do I get people to remember that one. All right, now D. If the central bank wishes to reverse the change in interest rate identified in Part A, what open market operation would it use? Oh, sweet. Good question. So they're saying that interest rates fell, right? So if interest rates fell, then the Fed is going to step in and either buy bonds or sell bonds to try and increase the money supply. So we had ISRR, right? If you want to increase the money supply, you can sell bonds, you could raise the interest rate, or you could raise the discount rate. Because right now they're going to put in a contractionary monetary policy. What are they trying to do? They're trying to bring this back, right? They're going to decrease the money supply. So now our new intersection is, well, it should continue to decrease it maybe like right here. So that way we're at MD1 and this spot right there. By decreasing the money supply from there to there, I've effectively brought interest rates back up to its remaining spot. So I could sell bonds. Sound good? That was a cool little point on that question. I know what you're thinking at home. You're like, yeah, man, that was amazing. All right, so let's get to the next one. This is number 3. Number 3. A country is at full employment and produces 2 types of goods. Yes, another one. Consumer goods and capital goods. Well, that's PPC curve. Draw a correctly labeled PPC curve of consumer on the horizontal and capital on the vertical. Indicate a point on your graph. X represents full employment and possible combinations. Oh, okay. Capital. Consumer. Any point? Sure. So indicate a point on your graph, label X, that represents full employment and a possible combination. That is definitely a possible. It's right in the middle. Everyone's happy. Assume there's an increase in the country's national savings. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the loanable funds market and show the change in real interest rate from the increase in savings. All right. So loanable funds market. This was part A. This one's part B. Oh yeah, the kids' concert has begun. So we have real interest rates, and we have quantity of loanable funds. We have the demand for loanable funds. We have supply of loanable funds. We've got our interest rate at equilibrium. We have our quantity at equilibrium. So if there's an increase in national savings, please consult your shifters of the loanable funds market. Again, if we're saving more money, that's increasing the supply of loanable funds. Why? You put money into the bank, banks are going to loan that money out. Interest rates decrease. There's our B. On the same graph in part A, show a point labeled Z that represents full employment and a new combination of consumer goods and capital goods consistent with the increase in a country's national savings. What the deuce? All right, why would we do that? That's a really cool question. Interest rates go down. What have we just talked about up to this point with problems? Whenever interest rates go down, consumers borrow money to spend it on capital goods or consumer goods, and businesses are going to invest, right? More likely than not, when interest rates fall, we're looking more at business, right? Because businesses are going to take out those big things that are going to, they're going to be taking out the large loans for capital goods. Capital goods cost a lot more than consumer goods. So we're going to need to show that point over here. We're going to be purchasing more capital goods. And then referring to your answer in part C, will the long run aggregate supply curve shift to the right, to the left, or remain the same? Cool question. Now, what's going on with this one? We have our price level, we have our GDP, we have our AS, we have our AD. When we originally write here at point X, that could be represented by our spot at long run aggregate supply right there. We were chilling at equilibrium, right? So this is where X was. Now people saved more money, that increased the supply of loanable funds over here and dropped the interest rates. Consumers and businesses are going to take out loans to borrow big ticket items. We're making the assumption that there's going to be more business in there. Short run aggregate demand is going to the right, but we're purchasing capital goods, right? We're making more capital good purchases, so we've shifted over here, which means our businesses are now more efficient. This was the long run shift. Please check your notes on shifters for long run and economic growth. So we shifted to long run aggregate supply 1, which would be a shift of our PPC curve to PPC 1. So with that one, we would say that our long run aggregate supply would shift to the right because we've increased our resources in capital goods, and thus our output can grow from long run aggregate supply to long run aggregate supply 1. Keep the good times rolling. I think we have 4 to go. Brutal. Come on, Mr. Owen, what are you doing to our lives? Get that centered up right there. Let's get my squiggly. All right. Country X and Country Y are trading partners, and both produce furnace and solar panels. All right. X, Y, furnace, solar. All right. Country X can produce 6 or 8, and Country Y can do 6 or 12. That's very considerate. They put an or with an underline in there. Which country has an absolute advantage in producing solar panels? So Y has an absolute advantage. That would be country Y. Why? Well, because absolute advantage is who can produce the most in the time period, or who can produce a good with the least amount of resources. This is an output question. They produce furnaces and solar panels. And so this is an output question. Y is larger, produces a larger number of solar panels. Boom. B says, calculate the opportunity cost of one furnace in country Y. All right, country Y, the opportunity cost of one furnace. This is output. Other goes over. All right, let's double check. That's what they're asking me. I flipped my stuff around. Opportunity cost of a furnace. One furnace has an opportunity cost of 2 solar panels. Which country has a comparative advantage in producing furnaces? All right, so 8/6 or 4/3. And then let's just solve this whole problem out. So this one is going to be 1/2, and this one is 3/4. That is smaller, so there's a comparative advantage. That is smaller, there's our comparative advantage. What do they want? Furnaces. So country X has a comparative advantage in producing furnaces. Explain, really? Okay. Well, country X has a comparative advantage in producing furnaces because when they produce a furnace, they give up 4/3 a solar panel, whereas when country Y produces a furnace, they give up 2 solar panels. Or you could say the opportunity cost of producing furnaces is lower in country Y. Maybe with this one, since it's so straightforward, I would just state the two, stating that Y has a lower opportunity cost. And then the next one, if the terms of trade were that two furnaces are exchanged for one solar panel, should country X produce solar panels domestically or import panels from country Y? Okay, so we're talking about solar panels. So we're in this category right here. These are some small numbers right here. So 3/4 is the same as 0.75 and 1/2 is 0.5, right? So I'm going to put this over here and we've got country X, they do 0.75, so this is solar, and then country Y, it's 0.5. We know that country Y has a comparative advantage. So these guys are our producer. They're asking, should country X produce solar panels domestically or import them from country Y? So these are our buyers. So we need a number that falls in between these two. He wants a number higher than 0.5. He wants to make more than the opportunity cost that he's giving up. He wants to do it cheaper. Now, we already know that 2 is greater than 0.75, right? So since he is going to be the importer because he has a comparative advantage, he is a producer, homie should just produce them domestically because when he makes a solar panel, he gives up 3/4 or 0.75 a furnace. They want to trade for 2. That's just a bad deal for him. So he should produce domestically. This guy's bummed because he was like, oh, I'm going to be doing really well. All right. So 2014. Number 2. The Federal Reserve can influence money supply. Thanks. Assume the Fed targets a lower federal funds rate. So a lower federal funds rate. So what are they trying to do? They're trying to do an expansionary monetary policy. I'm going to just write that in A. That way I just have it down here. Expansionary monetary policy, right? Why? Because whenever you have an expansionary policy, you're always dropping the interest rates. And they evaluate the federal funds rate as that. What open market operation can the Fed use to lower the target? Well, an expansionary monetary policy, or abbreviation, if you want to reduce the interest rates, you can buy bonds, you can lower the reserve rate or lower the discount rate. That was our acronym. Reduce the interest rate, you buy bonds, lower the reserve requirement, lower the discount rate. Now they said open market operation. So open market operations is the buying and selling of bonds. So we could buy bonds. That'll drop our interest rates, increasing the money supply. Using a correctly labeled graph of the money market, show the open market operation from part A. Alrighty. That actually will help explain what I was talking about because I might have gotten a little confusing. So I've got my nominal interest rate. I have my quantity of money. I have my money demand. I have my money supply. If I buy bonds, you buy bonds, you're making the money supply bigger because the bank had the bond, right? I don't have a bond anymore, but I have a, I got a horse. This represents a bond, and it's sitting in the asset section of the T-chart. Now, the Fed's like, yo, I want to buy your Spirit. I want to buy your Spirit bond. He's like, yeah, man, buy my Spirit bond. So the Fed, here comes that same cash. So the Fed gives this to the bank. The bank has increased their excess reserve. That Spirit bond is destroyed. This bank can now loan this money out to other people. So they have increased the money supply. Money supply goes to the right. If I'm evaluating my interest rates, I can see that my interest rate went from IR equilibrium to IR1. Interest rates have dropped. B. Assume the Federal Reserve buys bonds from commercial banks. Based only on this transaction, Will the level of required reserves in the commercial banks increase, decrease, remain the same? They're going to remain the same. You're like, what? That's pretty dismissive, Mr. Owen. Well, required reserves are based off of people putting money in the bank, right? Where I put money in the bank, it goes into a checkable deposit, a demand deposit, savings account, whatever you want to call it. The bank has to hold on to a percentage of that money that I put in the bank. Now, when the Fed buys a bond, they're buying spirit and they're giving the bank cash. These are both going into the asset section of the T chart. So it's not messing around with required reserves whatsoever. Now, if I was to deposit spirit into the bank as a consumer and I deposited spirit, the bank would have to hold on to the head of this horse and they could loan out the body. Also, the ending of Godfather 1, there was a horse in the person's bed. All right. That brings us to D. Another monetary policy action involves changing the discount rate. Define discount rate. Cool. Discount rate is the rate in which banks charge one another. No, I screwed that one up. I messed that one up. Discount rate is the rate in which the Fed charges a bank to borrow funds to cover their required reserves overnight. Different than the federal funds rate, which is where one bank loans another bank some money to cover the required reserves overnight. So discount rate. This goes back to when I was describing in the lecture the worst named thing in econ. Please tell me we're down to our last two. Down to our last two. Okay. Okay, this one is 2013, number 2. Assume that country of Fisherland produces only consumer goods and capital goods. Hey, Fisherland. The graph above shows the PPC curve of Fisherland, the production of which of the following exhibits increasing opportunity costs: consumer goods only, capital goods only, both goods, or neither goods. Both. It's showing the opportunity cost of both, right? So if I am here, I'm giving up this much. If I'm here, I'm giving up that much, etc. So it's showing both. Both. B. Redraw the graph given above. Show a point that represents fully employed, efficient use of resources on a redrawn graph labeled A. This is great FRQ. Man, this is just like, hey, give me a free point. So capital and consumer and A. Boom. Assume there's a recession in Fisherland on your graph in part B. Recession, inefficient use of resources, mainly people, workers. So there is our recession. Identify a fiscal policy that the Fisherland government can take to address the recession. When we are looking at fiscal policy, did I just write fiscal policy? I did. Fiscal policy, they can do two things. For expansionary, we can increase government spending or cut taxes. Either one of those would have been an acceptable answer. Assume instead that no discretionary fiscal policy were Assume instead that no discretionary policy actions were taken. Will the short-run aggregate supply increase, decrease, or remain the same in the long run? All right, so let's talk this out. We were sitting here with price level and GDP. We've got an AS, we have an AD, and we were hanging out on our equilibrium when we were at this stage right here. That would be representative here. Something happened, and most of the time it's always going to be an aggregate demand shift that's going to go down because this is macro. We're not going to have a recessionary gap that's supply shock. So we're going to say our price levels fell, our output fell. This new spot right here is representative of location C on this curve. So what's going to happen if price levels fall? In the end, you have these people that are going to be laid off. When they get rehired, they're going to get rehired at a lower price. So wages and resource prices in the long run fall. When wages and resource prices fall, that's going to affect aggregate supply. wages and resource prices fall into R. If R decreases, businesses can supply more to market and shift aggregate supply to the right and return us back to equilibrium. So will short run aggregate supply increase, decrease? It's going to increase. Why? Because in the long run, wages and resource prices will fall. Here we go, baby. Last one. Let's get this thing done. Number 3. Inflation and expected inflation are important determinants of economic activity. Thanks. Draw a correctly labeled graph of the short run Phillips curve. You got it, homie. Inflation. Use full words. I'm just lazy. Short run, Phillips curve. Long run, Phillips curve. Okay. Using your graph in part A, show the effect of an increase in the expected rate of inflation. Oh, okay. So that'll require us to think about this. Price level, GDP, AS, AD, long run aggregate supply. We're chilling here. We're chilling here. If this happens, right? Usually I have my graphs flipped. I usually have AS over here and Philip over here. Roll with it. So if we're expecting inflation, right? There's an increase in the expected inflation. I think inflation's coming. I'm not going to wait till it hits for it to happen because that's dumb. I'm going to walk into Copo's office and I'm like, yo, Copo, I was watching the news today and I heard there's inflation. I need a job. It's like, you know what? Your dad jokes are amazing. And we couldn't have made it through this homework assignment without you. You should deserve a raise. And I'd be like, what? So if I'm expecting inflation, I'm going to ask for higher wages. What's that going to do to my aggregate supply? It's going to decrease it, right? Going back up here, if my wage, it's frozen. Let it go. Okay. So if my wages go up, I'm a resource, right? I'm labor. So in that case, resource prices went up. Aggregate supply is now going to go the opposite direction. So if we're going to evaluate here, we're going to increase our price level and we're going to decrease our output from our equilibrium point. Now, how do we translate that over here? Well, in this case, we do know one thing. When AS shifts, if you have a shift of AS, it's going to result in a shift of our short run Phillips curve, right? Because a shift in AD is a movement along our short run Phillips curve. So in this case, I know that I'm going to have to shift the short run Phillips curve. But where am I shifting it to? I know my price level is going to go up. So if I'm starting right here, price level and inflation are the same. So I know it's going to be up here somewhere. I know that my GDP decreased, so I'm entering into a recession. My employment decreased, so my unemployment increased. So I'm somewhere over there. Boom, short run, Phillips curve 1. If this one shifts to the left, this one shifts to the right. Because remember, they're supposed to be mirror images of each other. So the answer on that one would be, the heck was the question? I just talked for like 10 minutes. What is the effect of the undergraph? What is the effect of am I on B? Where am I? Using your graph, show the effect of an increase in the, oh, okay, yeah. So you just draw short run Phillips curve 1. So there's your change. This is B. Oh my God, this is way too long. What is the effect of the increase in the expected inflation rate on the long run Phillips curve? Nothing. Long run Phillips curve is going to chill right here at our NRU. Ain't nothing budging the long run Phillips curve. Given the increase in the expected rate of inflation from part B, okay, will the nominal interest rate on new loans increase, decrease, or remain the same? It's going to increase, right? If price level goes up, then banks are going to have to charge more nominal interest rate in the short run. They're going to have to increase the interest rates to cover inflation. They're not going to loan out money without getting a return. Will the real interest rates on new loans increase, decrease, or remain unchanged? Ooh. So there's an increase in the expected inflation rate. Will the real interest rates increase, decrease, or stay the same? I'm gonna have to cheat on this one. The real interest rates on new loans in real interest rates. They're gonna have to remain. I think that's gonna remain unchanged. Let's cheat. This is 3D2. Yeah, it's gonna remain unchanged. Cool. Whew, close call on that one. All right. What's up? I'm almost done. I'm on the last problem. Did I feed the dogs? No. Dogs are dying. Assume the nominal interest rate is 8%, and let's drop this file right there. Assume the nominal interest rate is 8%. Borrowers and lenders expect the inflation rate to be 3%, and the growth rate of real GDP is 4%. Calculate the real interest rate. They gave us a lot of information as a distractor. We know that the equation for real interest rate is our nominal minus expected inflation or just inflation. So what they say our nominal was, they said our nominal was 8%. They said they are expecting a inflation of 3%. So what's my real interest rate? 5%. Pinned down. Let's get out of here. Peace, homies. I'll post some stuff for you soon for review. Probably tomorrow. Maybe not. Maybe. Maybe not. Peace.